Hello everyone, and welcome to From Source to Sea. This is the public reading that's come from the invitation to poets all over the Northwest to submit their poems on the rivers of the Northwest. But before we begin, there's a few things to say. So let me just deal with those quickly. The first thing to say, I'm not sure why it's the first, but it's the first that comes to hand. You'll find a piece of paper on or near your seat called a feedback form. These are hugely helpful in helping us to plan future events and to report back to our funders and supporters. So please do take the time to fill one in at the end. And the second thing to say is that we have, I think it's 13 readings tonight, and we have 12 poets so far. Fortunately, the 13th poet, the 13th poet is on her way and is reading second to last, so there's a good chance she'll be here in time, which is what we need. I'll explain about our donation scheme at the end, because it only bears saying once. And right now, I'm going to go straight to the introduction for our MC. But I do need to say this about Katie Hale. She has been our poet in residence during Litfest and has been busy in all kinds of ways, and will yet be busy after the festival's over. She was in a school in Morecambe running two workshops for school children, and she read earlier today launch reading for this wonderful collection, White Ghosts, some of which you'll read tonight, I hope. And there are copies outside, and you can buy them, and she'd be very happy to sign them for you. But Katie is come in. And if your name is Rebecca, you can sit in the front. You'll understand why in a minute. Katie is a poet and a novelist, and her novel "My Name Is Monster" was shortlisted for the Kishka's Golden Tentacle Award and has been translated into multiple languages. And I'm pretty sure we're about to hear news about a second novel, but there's certainly, who knows? It's a mystery. But there is a second novel on the way, which is great. Katie lives in Cumbria, where she also writes for theatre and immersive digital performance and mentors emerging poets. So this is someone who's completely invested in the world of poetry, and we couldn't think of a better person to be the MC for tonight's set of readings. So they will be in 4 sets, and Katie will do the introductions to each set. And then I think that's all we need. That is actually all we need to say. So there'll be 4 sets of readings. Some of them will be on video, 2 on video and 2 on audio. So occasionally you'll need to direct your gaze over there. So people sitting that side are going to find it harder to see than people sitting that side. So if you wanted to change your seat to be able to see the screen, now is the moment to do it. Okay, then I'm going to hand over to Katie, and away we go.
I was born in the morning, slithered out of the cut in my mother, a thing no bigger than a bacon rind, and squalling. There was something of the fox about you, she said later, a cub lifted too soon from the den. She watched my birth in the sheet metal ceiling, her other self a storm cloud brewing at dusk, a small fire far too far from the beach. Then my mother unfurled her body. Her arms were scrubbed tough, and she caught me. All through my life she has rocked my reflection as I head for the uncharted deep. Thank you very much Bill, for having me here at Litfest, and also for asking me to MC this evening and to select all these incredible poems. I feel a bit of a fraud, sort of standing up here and kind of taking the stage for myself when really tonight isn't about me. But poets don't get enough chances to hog the limelight, so I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to read 2 more poems from the book, and if there's time at the end, I'll finish with a final poem from the book. But I'm sort of, the theme is source to sea. Another reason to feel like a fraud is that these 3 poems are very loosely taking us from sea to source, in that one kind of uses the sea as a metaphor. We then pass through this next poem, which uses flood as a metaphor, and then onto a poem that is about literal mountain creeks, loosely. So this is a poem about my grandma, and my grandma was quite ill towards the end of her life. She lived till she was 100, and this poem is kind of inspired by, there's an incredible artist called Bernard Smilder. I'm not quite sure how you say the name. And they create these amazing images, these photographs of clouds. They essentially create real artificial clouds in enclosed spaces and then photograph them in the seconds before they dissipate. And this poem uses that as a metaphor. Nimbus. Some days, my grandma is a cloud, her face a god ray, and the sheets blue-white as insides of wrists. Some days, she needs only air to hold her aloft from the bed in the big dark room. There must be a moon somewhere, because my grandma is a swatch of snow. In the 4th episode this morning, about a man who still talks to his partner's ghost, furniture is floating of its own accord, though really, this is done with electricity and magnets. Some days, my grandma has her own current inside her, and maybe this is how I can stand in the space beneath her, scratch the plastic floor with my shoes where she casts no shadow, where she has lightning pent in her breast. Some days, she is heavy as rain. Her body is a flood, making all roads out impassable. The book, I know some of you were in the reading this morning, so apologies for the this morning. No, it's still this afternoon. It feels like it was this morning. Apologies for the double up. The book explores 400 years of my family down the maternal line, kind of going grandmother to grandmother to grandmother, passing down that line, and it straddles both sides of the Atlantic. And this next poem takes us back a couple of 100 years to I shouldn't even have started that because I haven't actually got I haven't got the number of greats written on this page. I think my 4 times great grandmother, maybe my 3 times great grandmother, who was called Peggy, and her husband Heritage, which is a great name if you're a poet and you come across a relative called Heritage and you're writing about inheritance. It's perfect. And it's they travelled west through the US across the Monongahela forest, and I decided to read this poem because it's got a creek in it and it felt appropriate for tonight. Peggy and her husband Heritage crossed the Monongahela forest, 1800s. Beaver dams harvest the creeks. A blood spray of robins shivers blossom from black cherry trees. At the lip of a paddock is a chained horse, her foal purples in the long grass. A turkey vulture lumbers into flight as you hie the intestinal turnpikes, wend up like a copperhead, searching for a muscle of soil to spike. You decorate your hood with the cloudbank's delicate beads, each drop a nation fractured in a seed of light. So I'm gonna finish with my own poems for now. And I'm picking up the wine. This is to signify the move into the celebratory part of the evening, and the kind of the gala aspect of the night. Because really, it was, I've said it was an incredible privilege to judge these poems, and part of me sort of hated that act of, that word judging. But, there were over 70 poems, so we obviously couldn't have everybody here tonight, or we would not finish tonight. But they are all there if you want to go and read them on the map, on the poetry map, on the website. So there was Bill sent me these 70 plus poems, and I sort of looked at them and thought, okay, how on earth am I going to distill these down into one evening's worth of readings? And so I decided I would create 3 piles: a yes pile, a maybe pile, and a no pile. And what quickly became apparent was that everything was going in the maybe pile. Partly because I didn't want to commit. I didn't want to commit to any poem by putting it in the yes pile, and there weren't really any poems that belonged in the no pile. So then I had to kind of go through again and kind of really whistle down the process. And what made it really difficult actually was the variety of poems. There were poems that approached the theme in all kinds of different ways. There were poems that used river as metaphor, poems that took us right from the source to the sea in one poem, some that concentrated on just one part of the river. There was river as memory, there was love for rivers, there was hate for rivers, there was fear of rivers as well. There were destructive rivers. There were rivers that also had some kind of healing or soothing or calming effect as well. And there was a lot of the power of rivers, and there was also a lot of joy in the poems, and a little bit of humour as well. And hopefully from what we've got here tonight and what we're going to hear either read on this stage or from the audiovisual is a real sampling of that, and hopefully you get a sense of that variety. So just to kind of reiterate what Bill said about how the evening is going to work, there are 4 sets of poems. At the start of each set, I will introduce the 3 or 4 poets who will be reading in that set, and then I will sit down and I'll ask you just to come up one after the other rather than me getting up and down in between each one of you, because as much as I like to hug the limelight, you don't need me hugging the limelight that much. So we're going to start with our first set, and our first set I hope really acts as a kind of introduction to the evening, and contains some of that breadth that I was just talking about. So our first 3 poets, we have Kerry Darbishire, who will be joining us through the medium of pre-recorded video. And we have Joe Dixon, who will be joining us through the medium of standing on the stage. And then we have Sarah Hymas, who will be joining us through the medium of audio recording. So a real variety there, and please do, hopefully you won't need to have patience with the tech because it will be seamless. But if just on the off chance it isn't, please do have patience with the tech in bringing you these wonderful poems. So our first set, Kerry Darbishire, Joe Dixon and Sarah Hymas. Please give them a warm round of applause.
Sorry I can't be with you in person this evening, but thank you so much for this opportunity to read my poem. To be a river. To be that close. Feel leeches, frogs and trout arrive and leave with the seasons. To have damsels, beetles finding their way, and clouds in brief attendance admiring their fullness. To learn her song's drifting morning air, largo, forte after rain. To borrow her summer pearls, winter glitz, the way she dances in days of sun, nights of moons. To measure her ever-changing weight of fell rain, scree, all that is thrown at her, carcasses, tree limbs, blocking her every move. I envy the 100-year-old bridges grown weak at her touch. The boulders lodged in her bed like bodyguards at club doors. And to know who she is after drought, the scent and ease in which her skin recovers after scorching sun. The way she takes hellish weather for granted, greets floods, holds and lets herself go, breaking banks thick with foxglove and fern, sweeping villages and towns to one side, to be unafraid of losing herself to the sea. Thank you.
I'll do it down a bit shorter than Katie. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say thank you ever so much, Katie, for choosing my poem. It really means a lot to me to be here this evening. I'm a graduate of Lancaster University. I studied here and I studied literature here. And when I was here, I lived just a few streets away in Regent Street. So being here is really quite important to me. And when I was here, I made some very good friends, and that was 30 years ago, so you'd be able to guess how old I am, perhaps. We had a 30-year reunion here just last September, where we all came, and I'm actually staying in campus tonight as well, which is very, very strange, being back there. I'm going to read my poem, which is from my collection Pearl, which is published by Shoestring, by John Lucas, which is a publisher in Nottingham. And Green is about the area of outstanding natural beauty. I'm never quite sure if I got those initials right. Arnside and Silverdale. I often come back to this area, and I have a very special connection with it. The poem is a quite short poem, and it's in 3 stanzas, and each is separated on the page by an asterisk, really to emphasise that sense of them being 3 distinct but also linked moments. And it begins by the water and moves a little further away. It's called Green. By mud flats I thumb a second-hand guide. Black-headed gulls, what I'll say is a curlew, and 2 cormorants poised back to back, a heart-shaped hole between. Late snow up by the trig liquefies between my fingertips, and the vent in the tarn's membrane flashes fish I can't name yet. I toss ice chips, they skid and chime while a merlin or sparrowhawk freewheels into the scrub. Thank you.
There's more than one beginning high in the Howgills, where the tussocked sponge of a steeply worming gill mashes aquifers and soil, despite no rain for weeks. No trees break the dome of horizon. And leaden-footed in this heat, irritable not to be floating in the slow flow of a bend downstream, I search and climb higher and higher until I lose everyone to sight and sound. To where map and compass become irrelevant in the hard green light of late afternoon. I shout, "I'm here, I'm here," listening for a reply of "Here, I'm here," over the curve of the unseen. And nothing, at least no cry of human nor bird, but the quiet scuttle of beetle and spider as my feet angle to keep to a contour line. Until a catch of light tonguing below, a smallest stitch in the furrow of rocks and hollows calls for no one, nothing more than for me to lay a swollen palm on its cleft of moss and milfoil, to receive the cool issue rising from the dark's pressing course.
Thank you to our 3 readers, in person, through video and through audio. I think it's such a wonderful thing, isn't it, that we can have that that we can sit in the room or watch online, and we can be joined by people who are both in the room and also who are elsewhere. And there's a real kind of, talking about from source to sea and the sort of flow of rivers and the movement from one place to another. I think that's a really beautiful thing, and something that it would be really sad if I had to read all the poems of the poets who either are unable to be here tonight for whatever reason. You'd very quickly get bored of my voice. That said, I am going to read a poem now, but it isn't one of mine. It is. I thought, who writes about rivers? Obviously, a lot of poets write about rivers. Who writes about rivers? Who is somewhere local to me? Well, Wordsworth seemed an obvious choice. Wordsworth got a mention in the reading earlier this afternoon as well. And I've tried to choose so between the sets, I'm going to read a poem by somebody else or a part of a poem by somebody else. And I've tried to choose poems that speak to the set that you're about to hear. And I've tried to choose poems that sort of echo that idea of source to sea, poets from the past, the kind of part of our source material as contemporary poets, that sort of flow into our own practice in a very laboured, extended metaphor. So I'm going to read the first of Wordsworth's sonnets from the River Duddon. And in this sonnet, for anyone who doesn't know it, he's kind of comparing the kind of grand rivers of Europe and the grand rivers of mythology to the Duddon, and the Duddon, unsurprisingly, comes out on top. Not envying Latian shades, if yet they throw a grateful coolness round that crystal spring, Blandusia, prattling as when long ago the Sabine bard was moved her praise to sing, careless of flowers that in perennial blow round the moist marge of Persian fountains cling, heedless of alpine torrents thundering through ice-built arches radiant as heaven's bow, I seek the birthplace of a native stream. All hail, ye mountains, hail thou morning light. Better to breathe at large on this clear height than toil in needless sleep from dream to dream. Pure flow the verse, pure, vigorous, free and bright. For Duddon, long-loved Duddon, is my theme. And pure flow the verse into our next set. See, that was seamless. Wasn't that seamless? Our next set, we have 4 poets. We begin with an audio recording from Maggie Norton, followed by 3 poets who are in person in the room. We have Emma Crighton, Mike Barlow, and Clare Proctor. Please give them a warm round of applause.
Catrig Force by Maggie Norton. Like an elver, I wriggle through the old gate stopgap, gurgle through shallows, then headlong drop to roar my fury, to make sweet havoc. I thunder cascades out of the gorge, boil them up the lichened rock, spray the ribble deep below. Droves of bikers and hikers and ill-shod day trippers watch me hammer out clefts and clints. Perch on this shadow, I'll whisper that Turner stole light from my muted greens, feel the welcome chill on my breath. Go if you must to Stainforth's tea shop, to Snowdrop and Winter Aconites, where I whisper foam onto the stepping stones. Why aren't I left to my own devices? Don't quarrel with a river. Fools, you blundered into my wilderness.
As well as being a terrible tech, I'm also a terrible poet. This poem was actually written directly in response to Wordsworth's Dudden sonnets. It's really quite disrespectful about him and a little bit sweary, so I'm really sorry to the younger ears in the audience. Here goes. This is Dudden's Flooding. Wordsworth wrote 34 sonnets about Dudden. And respectfully, fuck him. The River Dudden, that crotchety, fickle little trickle of a thing, slow old man, waterlogged and stagnant, stared at by sheep, pointless, pathetic, and Jesus, that nightmare of a bridge. Rain falls, the Dudden floods. Bridge inundated, road cut off, no way in or out. Watching the tides, waiting for it, hoping for it, the fields lying sodden and sheepless and sore. It's a river, yes, and a big inconvenience. Small river, small flood, big bloody disaster. So fuck the Dudden. But look, in the summer, if it ever stops raining, I'll pay penance, go where the wild swimmers do, dip myself into the soothing shallows as an offering, an apology. I have my off days too.
This is really a town and country poem. I once lived in Garsdale by the River Clough, which is a tributary to the Lune. And then I lived, and I still have a flat on the quay here. When it rains in the hills, the river churns its long tongue through the town, brings with it stumps, logs, fence posts, the carcass of a badger, torn fertiliser sacks. I picture gabardine cloud ripped on the moor's edge, heather shaking in hail, the quicksilver trickle of sky through peat, sheep, their rumps to the wind, cattle ankled in mud. Like lightning, swollen becks flash hillsides, swell the river so it licks shale lips, prizes makeshift bridges from their roots. I hear your heavy boots slap puddles, your coded knock. From beneath the bent peak of your cap, its screen of drips, you wink. 2 trout slip from the pocket of your coat. There was a day you leant over our garden wall, pipe in your mouth the wrong way up, inquiring, neighbourly-like, how long we'd be staying. When it rains in the hills, the river down here sings a wild song, foams at the mouth, twists its tongue on the messages it brings, keeps us in our place. Thank you.
I have a confession to make before I read mine. It's about a lamprey, and I've never actually seen one in real life. I did learn about them from the River Eden, but via the medium of Google. But I recommend, if you're as ignorant about lamprey as I was, do have a look at them because they're fascinating creatures. This is what the River Eden taught me. The river taught me about the lamprey and when to look for them a rainy winter evening, and how to find them, shining light into water like an interrogation. The river taught me not to fear their blood-sucking nature when crossing near their rows of swirling teeth, that their iridescent eyes search against the flow, their slender bodies powering towards the mating grounds. The river taught me that gravel and finer silts are at the heart of it all, the breeding and spawning before death, that truth is a lamprey out of water, thrashing in its slippy, stinking skin. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our second set of readers. You see what I mean about the variety, right? The variety of poetry, and how difficult it was to choose poems for tonight as a result. The next set is going to take us from sort of country rivers, as Mike hinted at in his introduction, these rivers that are of the country and of the city, rivers that are kind of rural and urban. And the next set sort of starts to take us towards darker rivers and city rivers in a kind of more destructive, wider flow. And just ahead of that, while we're still on our sort of calmer rivers, I suppose, or our more rural rivers, I just want to read. There's only a section from Tennyson's The Brook. It's a longish poem, so I'm just going to read 3 stanzas. I come from haunts of coot and hern. I make a sudden sally, and sparkle out among the fern to bicker down a valley. By 30 hills I hurry down, or slip between the ridges. By 20 thorps, a little town, and 100 bridges. Like the one over the Duddon, I assume. Till last by Philip's farm I flow to join the brimming river. For men may come, and men may go, but I go on forever. And so we will go on to our next set. So our next set, we have 3 poets. First, we have Angela Cheveau, who will be joining us through a video recording. We then have David Canning and Elizabeth Gibson, who are both in the room. So please give them all a warm round of applause.
My name is Angela Cheveau, and a huge thank you to poet Katie Hale for including my poem in this wonderful project. It really is an honour to be involved. I'm so sorry I can't be there tonight, but due to COVID I've had to remain at home. This is my poem called The River Mersey. Ribbon of river unspooling, coiling through darkness, a moon-silvered snake slithering through city streets, cutting like a knife through the shivering dark of shadow-shrouded docks and brightly lit buildings. Salt-soaked tongue licking at the shoreline, brackish with wind-lipped silt, hissing a history into the ear of night. By day, a gleaming sheet of battered metal, hammered low by the blow of sullen sunlight, beaten and bent beneath a steel grey sky. Fistfuls of birds fizz, sparks from a soldering iron singeing a trail of gold over molten water, and the river sings a sad, lonely song to people passing by. Faces crumpled like yesterday's news, her murky waters flowing unknowingly through their veins, her clipped vowels steeped in seaweed, fricative consonants forced through the dry, narrow riverbed of their throats. Tidal waters rising and falling in the hollow pools of their eyes. This river drenched in the dregs of colonial history, dragging its weight through a city built on the blood of slavery. Poverty still scorching its mark on the tongue of its people, still branded into their skin. Ghostly faces of long-gone sailors still drift beneath the mirrored glass of her dark waters. Galleons of countless souls carried away in her luckless arms. By her side, lovers padlock hope to rusted railings, toss in dreams to see if they float. Salmon smote and par silver the surge once more. In the estuaries redshank return along with pintail, dunlin and turnstone. Waters teeming with whiting, plaice and flounder, hooded grey seal. And the river flows on, forging her way forward into the future. The strength of the city, her winding spine, coursing through the dreams of all who walk beside her. Thank you.
Good evening. I too grew up very close to the River Mersey, but spent the last 30 odd years of my life very close to the Thames, and now I live near the Lune, so rivers are a big part of my life. But when we were growing up in Stockport, we were always warned, don't go anywhere near the Mersey. It's a horrible river. It's full of, pollution and everything. But being a child, I was obsessed with it. I always used to go and see how far I could go and paddling into it. And just anyway, so this is called Salmon Memory. Here, at the end and beginning of journeys, at the confluence of Tame and Goit, the now dislocated machinery of our fathers rusts on its spindles. The engines that choked out the dirt which blackens the proud red doorsteps of our mothers lie gutted inside their broken mills. And I return after 30 years to my source, as if compelled, with a memory of rivers brown as Robinson's beer, waters made acid with tanner's waste, and the discarded sinew and bones of unwanted dogs or boiled to glue horses. The Mersey, this fabled unholy river, is humbly birthed between sandstone cliffs under the grey arches of a motorway bridge, all mildew and soot, cotton and rags. It remains beneath the rippling tread of footfall in grey precincts, retail therapy. What ghosts have drawn me back, I cannot say. Perhaps in a homecoming there is redemption. Indeed, our river has become more loved, cleansed in the generation that has passed since my leaving. And so too the salmon have instinctively returned to leap its weirs. But a poison remains buried deep in its bed, and we must avoid the temptation to dig.
Hi, I'm really happy to be chosen by Katie. This is a poem about the River Irwell, which is between Manchester and Salford. It's the natural border, and it's somewhere that I live in Manchester, and I like to stand and look at the river. And last summer, some cormorants moved in, and that was quite exotic in the middle of the city. And I've got a whole kind of series of poems about the cormorants and how my journey of connecting with them also kind of lined up with me going through surgery for the first time in my life, and that felt like a massive milestone. And this is towards the end of that kind of series. So it's called The Right Ending. I have accepted that my cormorant is gone. I am healing. Maybe Corey was only here to get me through surgery. I know this may be the right ending, but it feels lonely. The dregs of the day, Victoria Bridge, my favourite view, even now, with all the construction, gutted buildings, the remains of the restaurant, last summer, that last meal. The sunset is apricot juice in windows. Why do you do this, Manchester? Keep being beautiful. The stone of the bridge is mossy and dark with wet, my belly and thighs in its lap. It's still amazing that I can be alone here when the world is so crowded. And there is Corey, tiny dark sickle bobbing and re-emerging within its own orbit of silver sunwater. When Corey disappears into the distant water, I let it go. This is the right ending. Ripples zigzag like stretch marks. Then Corey flying under me, the bridge to the other side. Like a plane, black and steady, rounded cabin, wings arched, more solid than I ever expected from such a delicate sepia sketch of a bird. I stay put for now. I know when I decide to look, I just have to cross and see Corey clinging to the river wall, a brown umbrella. There are patches of bubbles under the water. Another bird or a sign of magic? or just breathing, living.
So easy sitting down there to forget that I actually have to come back up here between sets. I just keep getting so engrossed in the poems. And I've heard them all before, you know. I've read them all already. So we move on now towards our final set, which seems to have come around incredibly quickly. So just to delay that ever so slightly, I want to introduce this set with a poem from Emily Dickinson. So as you can imagine, it's quite a short poem. But we kind of move now from the rivers towards the sea, and we start thinking about the kind of becoming of river into something else. My river runs to thee. Blue sea, wilt thou welcome me? My river awaits reply. O sea, look graciously. I'll fetch thee brooks from spotted nooks. Say, sea, take me. So on now to the sea. So our final set of 3 poets, we have 2 poems that do explore that movement into the sea, and then a third poet, which, you'll hear, I think is a kind of a nice circular coming back around to the idea of rivers and the big and small rivers that we sort of started with the idea of the Duddon and the beauty of the smaller river. So, for our 4th and final set, please give a warm round of applause to Alice Evans, Rebecca Samuels and John Elwood. Thank you.
A beached baleen smashes on shore rock, like the piano you owned and kept with 3 missing notes. 2 thuds, heavy leaden chords struck by a child playing on the beach with driftwood on the whale's bulk. And so your name returns to me like violence, licking loosened fingers to strike each page, of notes arched like slowly breaking waves on the 5-lined manuscript. A bass note strikes. Open-mouthed, naked, and kissing the shore with salted tongue lost among sunken ships. Over the sand, water murmurs and spits out shale. The brackish breath would absorb my weight like ground bones. The oceans between us fall to silence. They put out a light like spit on singed fingers. Thank you.
A magnificent sea, green as glass bottles, surf grinding shells to powder on the beach. Wade into the water, let it wash over you. Spray of hailstones and diamonds. Such a cold, fierce, glittering day. A high, bare blue sky.
So I live near Carnforth, in Carnforth in fact, and Carnforth's an unpretentious little town with an unpretentious little river that probably not many people in Carnforth even know about. And I think the name of Carnforth actually comes via the name of the river. The river is the Keer, and originally there was probably a ford there, and therefore we have Carnforth as come through the ages. So this is a little poem about our humble river, the humble Keer. Few know it's here, the humble Keer. There's not even a weir on our humdrum Keer. No rapids to fear, it's a tardy Keer. The water's not clear, such a bleary Keer. No chance of a pier on the tiny Keir. No garden for beer by the puny Keir. No salmon appear in the cloudy Keir. No gushing to hear such a silent Keir. You'll be forgotten soon, said the mighty loon. You're now but a dribble, said the cruel ribble. Your estuary is dire, said cheeky Wyre. Not exactly the Trent, said haughty Kent. But let's not jeer at the harmless Keir. Instead, raise a cheer for our lowly Keir. We're blessed with rivers great and small. Let's cherish this gift and love them all.
Let's cherish this gift and love them all. What a wonderful note to end on. I almost feel a bit rude now reading another poem after that, but I'm going to, because as I say, I've got the microphone. A huge thank you to everybody who has read tonight. A huge thank you to everybody whose poems didn't quite make it into this final 13, but who has uploaded their poetry onto the poetry map. It really is an amazing resource of poems, an amazing library of contemporary poems. Please do go away from here tonight, and while you're sitting at home with your post-festival gin and tonic, or in the morning with your festival hangover coffee, do check out the poems that are on that website, because there are some incredible ones that we couldn't quite just fit in terms of time and numbers tonight. Just before I read my own final poem, I just want to kind of warn all the poets in a moment. After I've read, I'll invite Bill back up onto the stage, and then at some point he's going to invite all of you back up onto the stage as well for a sort of group thank you and group photo. So just so you're braced for that, whether it's a choice to take that extra slug of wine or to not take that extra slug of wine is up to you. So I wanted to finish with, I suppose, the most rivery poem in White Ghosts, and it is a poem. I was never allowed a pet as a child because my mum and dad, but mainly my mum, was convinced that I wouldn't look after it. And she was probably right. The one pet that I did have was a fish, which I caught in the river at the bottom of the village. And this is a poem about its fate. Fish. Slip of metal. Little flicker I netted from the beck at the bottom of the village. How you suspended yourself, silent in your margarine tub world. How I watched for your rapid shivers, mercury broken from the bulb, the liquid shift. How you would rise till your spine feathered the surface, then drop, go still, wait. How once I tried to time my breath to your stillness, but had to let go. How I would blink, then think I'd missed your quick arabesques. Little fish, how you waited till my back was turned to fling yourself out into the world, a new coin tumbling, till the dark mouth of the plug hole took you in. Oh, how I picture you still, my sequined escapologist, flickering on through the pipes to where the depth of a river lies calling. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our poets. Over to you, Bill.
Well, we asked for poems about the rivers of the Northwest, and we got quite a range there, and what a great choice of the final poem from the group of 13, The Humble Keir. I shall go and find it. Before we go to the final thanks and end, 2 parish notices, if you'll allow me. The feedback form is really useful and helpful to us, so do please fill it in afterwards and leave it with one of our volunteers at the door. And the other thing to say is that, as I said at the beginning, we get support from statutory funders, from the local city council, from some of the smaller foundations and charities in and around Lancaster, but also from you, our supporters. And while we've gone out of our way this year to make the festival free in view of the cost of living crisis, if you could, on your way out, donate that loose fibre that's been scratching in your pocket for a time, please drop it into the red box, the red bucket on the way out, and that will help us to continue this work, and the feedback forms will help us to develop the festival and bring ever more events of this kind. But the last thing to say is I'm going to call all the poets up on stage now, and the wonderful MC Katie Hale, so come and join us, and then we will invite our audience. Come on. It's called Vamp Till Ready. We will invite our audience to give you, and our readers online, to our audience online, to our readers on the video, and to those who sent audio recordings, a great big warm round of applause. Thank you all.